Hello and welcome to Unacademy IAS English, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. A very good morning and welcome to the most comprehensive Hindu analysis on YouTube. So let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. From the Delhi edition of the Hindu, I have chosen 13 important articles. This will ensure that we don't leave any topic behind from today's newspaper, and once we carry out the comprehensive detailed analysis, there won't be any need for you to go back and read the newspaper again. So if you guys are liking this initiative and benefiting from the daily Hindu analysis, do support us with your likes and comments, because that is what keeps us motivated to keep doing better for you. Now, before we start the discussion, I have a very important announcement. Unacademy is providing the biggest ever offer with a flat 60% off on our IAS courses. Now you can enroll for our online classroom program at a price of just $22,999 for a 15-month subscription. This happens to be one of our lowest prices and it's a limited time offer. So this subscription will give you access to all our online live and recorded lectures by our top educators, along with the study material, the test series, the mentorship and doubt resolution sessions. Now, to avail this offer, all you have to do is click on the subscription link provided in the video description box and enter the code IAS English. The moment you enter the code IAS English, you will be able to see the discount being applied, and you can subscribe to the course at just $22,999. Then those who are preparing for the upcoming prelims, even those who are preparing for 2026 exams, please pay attention. We are launching the All India Prelims mock test on 9th of March. That is the coming Sunday. You have an opportunity to take up a prelims mock test and test your preparation by attempting these full-length papers. So make a note of the timing, and the link for the same also is provided in the video description box below. Now, if you want the PDF of this session after the class ends, including the annotations, please join my Telegram channel by scanning the QR code, because after the session, I'll be sharing this PDF so that you will have some notes for your reference. So with this, let's get started with the discussion and look at the first topic. Today, we have two related articles on page number 1 and page number 8. There is an editorial related to the process of elections conducted by the Election Commission of India. See, of late, the Election Commission of India has come under a lot of controversy and criticism over its handling of the electoral process in the country. Now, when you think about elections, the faith that we have in the electoral process, the faith that we citizens, the voters, have in the electoral process, and the faith that the political parties have placed on the electoral process is entirely dependent on the integrity of the institution which conducts the election. But of late, due to various developments, the very integrity of Election Commission is being repeatedly questioned, especially by political opposition and also by the critics. So that is the issue which this article is exploring here. There are two specific issues which have come up recently regarding the conduct of elections in India. So let's take a look at these two specific issues which are being discussed and debated across the country. One issue is the voter count, which appears to suddenly increase from election to election. Especially if you look at the general elections that was held last year in 2024 and the subsequent assembly elections that have been held in some states. If you look at the voter list and the number of voters who were registered, there is a significant anomaly being noted according to the political opposition. There appears to be a sudden, unexplained jump in the number of voters in certain states. That is what the opposition parties are alleging. Now, for example, if you look at a state such as Maharashtra, if you look at the voter count, the number of voters registered eligible for voting, enrolled on the electoral rolls, if you compare the data from the Lok Sabha elections of 2024 and the Maharashtra Assembly elections that was held, there is a jump of 48 lakh voters. Now, the question being raised by the critics and the opposition is that how can the voting population in a state like Maharashtra jump by 4.8 million in just a few months? So, based on this, they are alleging electoral fraud is being committed. But however, please note that the Hindu has looked into this controversy some time ago. The Hindu had actually carried out a detailed research on this topic. If you look at historical trends, even in previous years, in previous elections, such patterns have been noticed. Such trends in sudden jump in voting population has been noticed. It's not specific to Maharashtra or the recent elections that have been held. Even historically, such patterns have been noticed where there appears to be a sudden jump in the voting population from one election to another. This could be explained partly due to migration, as a number of voters would be a floating population moving from state to state. Many of them would get registered again on the electoral rolls. Also, the rise in population, also the increased enrollment of voters. Those who have not enrolled, they might take that proactive step. So these regular changes which keep happening, these regular updations which keep happening in the electoral roll will result in some changes in the voting population. There could be a decrease as well sometimes, and sometimes we have seen sudden jumps, sudden increase in the voting population. It appears that as if there is no abnormality, this is a regular pattern, but this questionable pattern which comes up once in a while has led opposition parties to question the process of elections. Definitely, the Election Commission needs to clarify as well. Though there is a historical trend of such patterns, it is a responsibility of the Election Commission as a constitutional high authority to bring out transparency with regard to the enrollment on the electoral rolls and bring out sufficient data and information to justify why such sudden jumps occur in certain states when it comes to the voting population. So that is something the Election Commission also has to ensure. See, we can't blindly allege that foul play could be seen here or there is some conspiracy to suddenly increase the voting population. Political opposition will do that, but we can't make such blind allegations. But since the allegations are present, it is important for the Election Commission to uphold the integrity of the process. There can't be a single tarnished image on the Election Commission and the electoral process. Even if it's invalid complaint or invalid criticism, it's important for the Election Commission to counter those allegations by bringing out the facts. But that requires transparency. So this is where the Election Commission has to do better. It has to ensure there is more transparency when it comes to the updation of electoral rolls in the country. So this is one important point that we take away from the editorial. Now let's look at the second issue which has come up with regard to conduct of elections in the country. The second issue which has been flagged by opposition parties is that voters who have registered with a voter ID card, I'm sure many of you would have voter ID cards. If you see your voter ID card, what does it contain? It contains your image. It contains basic details. It also contains a epic number. On the voter ID, there is a certain unique number which is assigned to your voter ID card. If you notice, it is an alphanumeric code which is assigned. Correct? If you haven't noticed, please open your voter ID cards and check. There will be an alphanumeric code, the epic number, which makes your card unique, which is basically a system of identification which is used in the process of elections. Now, it has been noticed that the exact same alphanumeric code is repeated across different states. Different voter cards across the country apparently have same alphanumeric codes. Now, if you look at the epic number, the alphanumeric code, it consists of 3 letters at the start, which is a unique series that refers to different regions. And there is a 7 digit that follows the 3 letters. So there are 3 letters and then 7 digits that are present, which makes up the alphanumeric code to ensure the uniqueness of each voter ID card. According to Election Commission of India, the alphanumeric code is specific to each voter ID card. The 3 letters indicate the electoral constituencies, and the digits after that will ensure that it makes it a unique number, a unique identification number. But it has been noticed that voter ID cards registered across different states, sometimes it might be in the name of the same voter and sometimes it can be in the names of different voters. But alphanumeric code is the same. Now, how is this possible? Is there some foul play? Is there a conspiracy to manipulate our elections? That is the question, the criticism that opposition parties have brought up against the Election Commission. But even this, it can be explained. There is a reason why this is happening. Honestly, this is a flaw in the electoral process which the Election Commission has to fix. So how come different voter ID cards are having the same epic number? See, this is because there could be an instance of a migrant voter registering, let's say, in a state like West Bengal, which might be the home state of the voter. And the migrant voter would have migrated to a different state for the purposes of work, let's say to Maharashtra. In Maharashtra also, he would have registered again in the host state. Now, this migrant worker might have registered at 2 places. So, when these cards are issued by the Election Commission, they might often contain the same alphanumeric code. This is one possibility. And the other possibility is that it might be 2 different people having 2 different cards, but epic number being assigned is the same. See, please don't forget that in order to vote in the elections, you need to be domiciled in that area. You should be a resident of that constituency. You can't go and vote in 2 different constituencies. That is not allowed as per the electoral rules. A voter can cast a vote in the place of residence. You might be registered in other constituencies, but you can't go and cast vote in multiple constituencies. That is not legal. But here there is a operational flaw. Essentially, it's a operational mistake from the Election Commission, but this does not allow multiple voting to take place, because eventually the authorities will cross-check the documents and it does not lead to any kind of fraudulent voting as such. But it is indeed a procedural flaw. It's an operational mistake from the Election Commission that the same epic alphanumeric code is being assigned to 2 different voter cards. And this has led to speculation whether is it deliberate? Is there a bigger conspiracy? But as I said, this is more of a flaw, mistake, which can be fixed, which has to be fixed. To ensure that voters who are registered in multiple constituencies don't cast multiple votes, it is important to seed or link voter ID cards with Aadhaar. That seems to be the only option to fix this problem. The Aadhaar is a unique identification number assigned for the residents of the country. It's not a proof of citizenship. It's a proof of residency. Using Aadhaar and linking that with the voter ID cards, Election Commission of India should be able to curb this problem. It should be able to deal with the challenges faced by migrant voters and also prevent the same voter from casting vote in multiple constituencies. This has to be implemented. There is an operational mistake, a procedural flaw. Election Commission needs to address this by linking Aadhaar with the voter ID cards. This is what we learn from this editorial. Political parties might allege a conspiracy, right? Because making such allegations is their primary role. But as I said, please understand why it is happening. It's not that there is some deliberate large-scale conspiracy to manipulate our elections. No. Election Commission deals with one of the toughest exercises in the world. Logistically, conducting elections in India is honestly one of the toughest exercises in the world. There are procedural flaws present which needs to be addressed. To prevent the same alphanumeric codes, ensure the uniqueness of each voter ID card, and to ensure that we prevent voters from casting multiple votes in different constituencies, it is important to link Aadhaar with voter ID cards. That is the solution. But however, Aadhaar has its own problems. Aadhaar has its own criticism. One problem with Aadhaar is, what if the Aadhaar itself is fake or duplicate, which is a possibility. The other concern is biometric-based verification. If for elections, let's say Election Commission introduces biometric-based verification for voting to ensure only the right resident can cast the vote. What if biometrics fail or the technology fails? We have seen many instances where Aadhaar-based biometric verification has failed due to technological errors, technical problems. Sometimes the Aadhaar card holders, their fingerprints might have erased over years and years of hard manual work. So biometric verification, if it fails, will it lead to voters losing their right to vote? Will it lead to exclusion of voters? That is a bigger concern. It will take away the right of eligible voters. Several eligible voters may not be able to cast the vote just because they couldn't get through the biometric verification. So there are problems with Aadhaar as well, but at least it will help bring more accountability, transparency into the voting process and ensure such procedural mistakes can be avoided. Now let me know what you think about this. Please take up this mains question. The Aadhaar seems the default bet to restrict a voter to one polling location. So that's a statement which has been given. Critically examine the concerned issue. So talk about why Aadhaar has to be seeded with voter ID card. What is the need? What is the requirement for that? And what are the concerns associated with Aadhaar itself? How Aadhaar seeding could possibly lead to election exclusions in case of voters with regard to elections in the country. Now let's move on to the next article. Let's look at another important editorial in today's newspaper. On page number 8, we have this article that focuses on the recent space achievement of United States. I'm sure all of you are aware that US achieved a big landmark the other day. I'm sure Sham sir must have discussed this topic. An American space company, a private space company known as Firefly Aerospace, became one of the first private companies in the world to successfully carry out a soft landing on the lunar surface. This mission was codenamed as the Blue Ghost Mission 1. Now, this is indeed a historic milestone. An American space company, Firefly Aerospace, conducting a soft landing on the lunar surface. This mission, Blue Ghost Mission 1, it carries number of payloads from NASA, the American National Space Agency. And it is said to be a part of the Artemis program. Have you heard of the Artemis program of NASA? Have you heard of the Artemis Accords? If you've been attending my classes, I've discussed the Artemis program, Artemis Accords many times in previous sessions. Through the Artemis program, NASA is returning back to the moon. NASA is collaborating with many countries, with allies from Europe, even India. India is part of the Artemis program. We also have signed the Artemis Accords with NASA. So NASA is returning back to the moon after shutting down the lunar program for many decades. And its goal is to send more lunar missions, deploy astronauts eventually, set up a lunar base, even consider lunar exploration for minerals and also look beyond the moon, maybe even the Mars and beyond. So this ambitious mega space project of NASA is the Artemis program, and many private companies are collaborating with the American Space Agency. Many foreign countries which are good friends with US are also part of the Artemis program by signing the Artemis Accords. As I said, India is also part of the Artemis Accords. We also have signed the Artemis Accords, and ISRO is very much part of the program with NASA. Now, what is the concern here? See, there is a problem. The problem is, after Firefly carried out the successful soft landing, it was a big scientific achievement, no doubt. For a private space company to conduct a soft landing, it's a remarkable achievement. Because till date, very few countries have landed on the moon. US, Russia, China, India. Very few countries have been able to succeed in such a complex mission. So for a private space company to successfully carry out a soft landing on the lunar surface is indeed a remarkable achievement. Now, don't you think this is an achievement of the entire mankind? Isn't this an achievement of the entire world? But the chief of NASA made some controversial statements after the soft landing was done. This is where the problem comes up. That is the focus of this editorial. The chief of NASA stated that America will always come first. This is basically the campaign of the American president, Donald Trump. Make America great again. Bring America to be the first priority. Bring back America to be the top priority for not just Americans, but for American corporations as well. So NASA chief linking a private space mission, calling it an American achievement, which will help in American domination of space exploration, is indeed very, very concerning. And it goes against the established international rules and norms. Is that clear? The NASA chief delivered this speech after the successful soft landing of this mission and said that this establishes America's dominance in space exploration, that we will make America great again and America will be always first for NASA, and it will help in establishing American dominance in space. Now, some of you might counter my point. You might say, sir, what's wrong with this? NASA is a government space agency of the US government. Obviously, NASA will say that we will make America great again. America is first priority for us and America will dominate space exploration. What's the problem in this? See, there is no problem in taking national pride in space missions. Even we do that. When ISRO has a successful launch, be it the Gaganyaan mission which is coming up or the previous historic missions of ISRO from Chandrayaan to Mangalyaan, each and every time Indians take pride. There is nationalistic pride associated with space missions. There's no denying that. Please understand, there is a difference between taking pride, being a nationalist, being patriot, and stating that we will dominate space, that our country alone will dominate space. When such a statement comes from the chief of one of the leading space agencies in the world, it is indeed deeply concerning because this is against international rules and norms. The Outer Space Treaty, which was negotiated in 1967 and came into force in 1967, it has clearly declared that space is part of the global commons. Now, what do you mean by this? It means space does not belong to anyone. Outer space does not belong to any country. Have you ever seen Indian Prime Minister or ISRO chief saying that India will dominate the space race? That India will control the space developments? We take pride in our achievements. We take pride with ISRO, our scientists, their achievements. But we never say that we will dominate the upcoming space exploration and the space activities. China has often made such statements. China is known to have made such similar statements. Now, to listen to similar statements from NASA chief that America will dominate space exploration is very concerning because space does not belong to anyone. Space does not belong to US or China or anybody. You can't claim sovereignty in space. Space is part of the global commons, just like Antarctica, for example, the high seas, for example. These are part of the global commons. Outer Space Treaty is very clear that space and everything present in space belongs to the entire mankind, be it the moon or any celestial body. Any part of the space is seen as part of a shared resource, a global common shared between humanity. This is what the Outer Space Treaty that was negotiated through the United Nations has mandated. Then did you know that Outer Space Treaty has certain obligations as well on the countries which have signed the treaty? For example, as per the Outer Space Treaty, countries cannot place WMDs or weapons of mass destruction or nuclear weapons in space. This is clearly prohibited. Because see, in 1960s, the space race and arms race had heated up between US and Soviet Union. These global powers were busy developing ICBMs, intercontinental ballistic missiles, which would reach outer space before re-entering the Earth to strike the target. There was a fear that countries might use ICBMs to place nuclear weapons in orbit, in outer space, which could lead to militarization of space. Though Outer Space Treaty does not ban military activities, please understand my point. Listen to me carefully. The treaty does not ban military activities or militarization. However, it bans the placement of WMDs and nuclear weapons in space. Clear? It restricts militarization of space. It has advised countries not to militarize space, to not use space for military activities and for national competition between rivals. The other important obligation under Outer Space Treaty is that states are responsible for regulating all the space activities that emerge from their country. Now, let's say in India, ISRO is carrying out space missions. Today, we have private space companies and startups as well, which are running their own space projects, right, in collaboration with ISRO. Now, from any Indian mission, let's say there is a space accident which happens, or space debris is left behind, or a rocket component falls in some other country, causing some damage in another country. India will have to take responsibility. The state, the government will be liable. Whatever happens because of our space missions, whether the mission was conducted by a national space agency like ISRO or NASA, or by private space companies, does not matter. The government of that country where the mission originated is liable for all the damages associated with the space mission. Be it any space debris left behind in space which is posing a threat, or be it a component of a rocket or a satellite which has fallen in some other country, causing damage to people in another country. It's the responsibility of the state, obligation to recover that component, maybe pay compensation for the damages caused as well. Did you know what US did recently? It's very alarming if I tell you. Recently, a component of a rocket belonging to SpaceX. You know SpaceX, right? Owned by the most controversial individual right now, Elon Musk. A rocket component of SpaceX went out of control and it landed in Poland. It crash landed in Poland. When Poland raised the issue with the US, expecting that US will take responsibility and accept liability for this accident which had happened, you know what the US said? The regulator in the US, the FAA, the Federal Aviation Administration, denied any liability and responsibility. Their logic was, the moment SpaceX lost control of this component, automatically FAA loses regulatory oversight. Now, what kind of logic is this? Just because the space agency could not control its own components, can the regulator and the government claim that we are no longer liable? because the company lost control and automatically, technically speaking, we lose the ability to regulate it. That's not how Outer Space Treaty works. The Outer Space Treaty is very, very clear. Be it a mission from a space agency, part of the government, or a private space agency, the concerned government is liable. The concerned government is responsible for any accident, any liability arising out of space missions. Recently, US denied liability. It gave an irrational logic saying that SpaceX lost control, so we lose regulatory control over it as well. Now, these are very alarming, dangerous signs which are coming out from the US. Because given the proximity of Elon Musk to the Trump administration, the involvement of SpaceX in controversial space activities, including the Starlink project, which I have been discussing and highlighting from many, many classes. The Starlink communication project is indeed a concern and a threat for countries like India. It is not only polluting space and it is placing thousands of satellites in orbit, which is crowding out the available orbits in space. The usage of Starlink internet delivered through Starlink satellites by terrorist groups, hostile elements, can be a national security threat. India has not licensed Starlink to provide internet services in India, but Elon Musk's company has been providing such services in our neighborhood. We have seen cases, instances where elements have been using Starlink internet in Indian territory, though India has not permitted Starlink to deliver these services in India. So given these complications, the controversy surrounding the companies owned by Elon Musk, his proximity to the American government, and such controversial statements being made by none other than the chief of NASA that America will dominate space missions, this is a gross violation of international commitments. This could lead to an unnecessary space race between US and China. China already has ambitious plans to not only step up lunar missions, but even to colonize the moon in the coming decades. Trust me, in another 15-20 years, we might even see the first human habitation on the lunar surface, either through a Chinese mission or an America-led mission. If it serves the larger interests of mankind, then well and good. But if this becomes a national contest where the global powers compete to dominate space and try to take away space resources for themselves, then that is deeply concerning and even alarming for countries like India. So this is where India and others, especially European powers which are more responsible in this regard, we have to work together. We have to use platforms like UN and bring pressure on countries like US and China, which are entering a deadly space race. Trust me, you may not see it right now. It may not be very apparent. You might think I'm over-exaggerating. But trust me, the statements coming out from US, the way in which China is pursuing its missions, it's quite alarming. This could be the new frontier where countries could not just compete, possibly they might even go to conflict in order to control space resources. So that is why the editorial is striking a warning. And I think we need to heed to this and take this topic very seriously. So please take up this question for your answer writing practice. Using the points that I have discussed and the structure that I followed in my discussion, try to write a good answer for this question. And please, some of you, try to post your answers in the comment section so it can help other students as well. Now let's look at the other articles. On the front page, we have an article related to the Ukraine war. Ukraine's President Vladimir Zelenskyy has expressed regret regarding what happened at the Oval Office a few days ago. I'm sure all of you are aware as to how Zelenskyy was almost humiliated by the American leaders, the president and the vice president, both of them. They engaged in a shouting match, which is quite unprecedented in global diplomacy. Zelenskyy also takes a share of the blame because Zelenskyy went off script. He broke standard diplomatic protocol by trying to raise the concerns of Ukraine as part of the peace process which is being negotiated. And of course, Ukraine has genuine, understandable concerns. But if Zelenskyy was more realistic, right, he would have adopted a more prudent approach and pushed towards signing a peace deal to bring the brutal war in Ukraine to an end. Now, as you all know, Donald Trump has been pushing for a Ukraine minerals deal as a payback for the billions of dollars that US has pumped into Ukraine to fund the war. Without American support, Ukraine cannot sustain this war against Russia. Trump has claimed that US has given $350 billion in funding. Experts believe this is an exaggerated number. Actual number might be around $150 billion. But still, it's a very significant support. Financial support, the weapons that US has supplied has been critical for Ukraine, without which it would not have been able to sustain the war and stand up against the Russian invasion. So now Trump expects Ukraine to pay back for the hard-earned American taxpayers' money which has been drained in the Ukraine war, which appears to be a little fair as well. If US has given so much support to Ukraine in the war, obviously US would expect something in return. But the way in which Trump administration has been pushing for a minerals deal, it appears to be an imperial colonial agenda to basically take control of Ukraine's mineral wealth and resources. See, the most problematic proposal here is the reconstruction fund which has been proposed. US has proposed a Ukraine reconstruction fund to help rebuild Ukraine and reconstruct Ukraine's infrastructure following the end of the war. Now, the concern here is, see, first of all, Ukraine has been excluded from the peace process. I hope you know that. US is now directly negotiating with Russia. I've discussed this topic as well in previous sessions. Trump and Putin have held direct talks, and their officials are engaging with each other directly to work out an end to the Ukraine war. So by excluding Ukraine, the US might essentially agree to recognize the territory that Russia has annexed, that Russia has captured. So Ukraine is already losing out on nearly 20% of its territory. In eastern southern parts of Ukraine, from Donbas region to the Crimean Peninsula, Ukraine will lose significant territory which has already come under Russian control. US might even legitimize this and recognize this. Now, upon that, US, which is expecting payback from Ukraine, is pushing for this minerals deal and a reconstruction fund. In this reconstruction fund, the American proposal is that 50% of whatever Ukraine earns from its resources should be contributed into this fund. See, Ukraine will have a lot of resources, agricultural resources, some food exports, oil and gas reserves, energy exports as well, and mineral wealth, mineral resources, including critical strategic minerals and rare earth elements. Whatever wealth Ukraine will generate from its resources by monetizing its resources, 50% of it should be contributed into this fund. Who will control the fund? US and Ukraine. Obviously, Ukraine being a weaker party, it basically means US will control this entire fund. Now, isn't this an imperial colonial imposition where US is basically demanding half of Ukraine's wealth and resources? It is obviously unfair for Ukraine, right? And also don't forget the possible collusion here, because American companies like Tesla, which manufacture electric cars, they need critical mineral supplies such as lithium, nickel and cobalt, which can be found in Ukraine. So is there a agenda, a possible nexus between the Trump administration and Elon Musk owned enterprises to exploit such resources around the world through an imperial colonial agenda, just because they have to compete with China? Obviously, you can understand why Zelenskyy was not happy with what Trump was proposing. That explains why Zelenskyy burst out and he broke protocol, and he pointed out how it was unfair for Ukraine to be being pushed in this manner. This led the Vice President J.D. Vance to retaliate and publicly question and shout, and it was followed up by President Trump as well, leading to a very undiplomatic exchange. Eventually, Zelenskyy was asked to leave the White House, basically kicked out, and it appeared that the deal was falling apart. In fact, Zelenskyy met with European leaders who had convened a separate meeting where European countries have promised support for Ukraine. But Zelenskyy even made another statement. He said, end to the war is very, very far away, which means Ukraine was not ready for any kind of deal or settlement. This made Donald Trump very angry, and Donald Trump decided to cut off the aid which has been supplied to Ukraine. Just the other day, the Trump administration has formally blocked the delivery of financial aid and military aid to Ukraine, which will basically cripple Ukraine's war efforts. So with US cutting off military aid and financial aid, now Zelenskyy has to fall in line. Zelenskyy has regretted his actions. Now he is saying that without American leadership and support, Ukraine will not be able to survive in this war, which is the reality. Ukraine, as we have always mentioned, has no leverage in this conflict. Though it is unfair, it is inhuman, eventually that is the most pragmatic path to end this war, to save whatever is left. The only option which is left probably right now is to accept the deal, even give away some territory to Russia, give away a part of its wealth and resources to the US, and ensure that whatever remains of Ukraine will survive at peace. But there has to be some security guarantees, and US is not committing, and neither Russia will commit to any kind of guarantees. What is the guarantee that tomorrow there won't be another invasion? What's the guarantee that US will not exploit the resources even more? What's the guarantee that US will not misuse this fund? Instead of reconstructing Ukraine, what if US benefits itself, profits its own companies? These questions are not answered. But Zelenskyy understands that he is on the back foot. His country essentially has no leverage. They are on the back foot. They have to accept what's being offered. So he has taken a conciliatory step. He has essentially regretted the spat with Donald Trump and JD Vance, almost apologized for what happened, even though it's not his fault, even though it's honestly, it's not his mistake. And now he has said that he's ready for the peace deal, that he hopes that US will protect Ukrainian interests, and he has basically reached out to the US administration, pointing out that Ukraine is ready for a peace process. So maybe things will move ahead again, though there was a big disruption that happened a few days ago. Hopefully things will come back on track. Maybe in few weeks, the war might end with a possible peace deal. Let's look at another important article on page 10. I think it's a very interesting article here that focuses on Taiwan. This helps us understand the Taiwan issue quickly, and also the tensions between US and China over the Taiwan issue. So let's quickly understand this topic. After this, we only have few small topics left, which we can wrap up as quickly as possible. So let's start with this discussion with a map. Let's see where Taiwan is located. This is Taiwan over here, a small island between South China Sea and the East China Sea, located in the Pacific. So Taiwan is separated from mainland China through the Taiwan Strait, which you can see over here. This narrow water body that separates Taiwan on one side and mainland China on the other side is the Taiwan Strait, a strategic waterway. Now, the dispute between China and Taiwan goes all the way back to the Chinese Civil War of 1940s. The Chinese Civil War was essentially fought between the communists on one side, the Communist Party of China on one side, led by Mao Zedong, and the KMT, the Kuomintang Party, on the other side, led by the legendary leader of the Kuomintangs, Chiang Kai-shek, which had formed the then Chinese government, the Republic of China. See, back then, in 1930s, 1940s, China, as you see, mainland China, was governed by a government called Republic of China. The party in power was the Kuomintang Party under Chiang Kai-shek. Now, this brutal civil war between communists on one side, the Kuomintangs on the other side, had consumed the country. Eventually, Maoists won the war under Mao Zedong. That's how the Communist Party won the conflict, captured power, and established the modern Chinese state, which we know as the PRC, the People's Republic of China. The PRC was formed following the civil war, which was won by the Maoists, the communists, who captured power by toppling the Republic of China. Republic of China, which was toppled, was cornered and pushed into this small island called Taiwan, and all the Kuomintangs were pushed away. The Kuomintangs took shelter, refuge in Taiwan. Since then, China, that is mainland China, has claimed sovereignty over Taiwan as well. China always says, that is PRC, People's Republic of China, Communist China always says that someday Taiwan will reunify. Someday Taiwan will be captured if necessary by force. That is what China keeps on insisting. The Kuomintangs were also authoritarian, but eventually Republic of China transitioned into a democracy. By 1970s, 1980s, Taiwan transitioned into a democracy, and today it has democratic elections, democratic parties come to power. In fact, recently, just last year, fresh elections were held, and the Democratic Progressive Party has won, which basically cements democracy in the country. But China keeps on making these controversial statements that someday we will occupy Taiwan, we'll take back Taiwan and integrate Taiwan into China. So this is a question of sovereignty. So at one point, there were two Chinas essentially. Two Chinese governments existed at one point. One is the PRC, formed by the communists. The other was Republic of China, formed by the Kuomintangs. That's where China came out with a principle and a policy, which is famously known as the One China Principle and One China Policy. The PRC said, look, there is only one China. Chinese land or territory, the sovereignty is just one. So be it Tibet, be it Xinjiang, which were all annexed by then, including Inner Mongolia, Hong Kong, and Taiwan, all these areas where disputes were present or annexations were done. China said all these territories belong to our sovereignty. There's only one China. Countries have to accept and respect that. And there is only one Chinese government, the One China policy, which means China expected, PRC expected the world to recognize PRC as the only legitimate government and not have relations with Republic of China in Taiwan. So most countries came around to accept the One China Principle and One China Policy, including India. Majority of the countries in the world have accepted One China Principle and One China Policy. So we don't question China's sovereignty over Tibet or Xinjiang or Inner Mongolia or Hong Kong or even Taiwan for that matter. That's why India does not have official diplomatic relations with Taiwan. We only have economic cultural ties, but we do not have official diplomatic ties with Taiwan because we don't recognize Taiwan as a country. Clear? Now, since China has these claims, the United States and Western powers have deliberately aggravated the issue by backing and supporting Taiwan and its claims for independence. See, since many decades, Republic of China has claimed to be an independent country, though it's not recognized by anyone. It's not a UN member state. It has claimed independence. It wants that recognition. It wants to break away from China. It even has this ambitious claim that someday they will form the government of the whole of China by toppling the PRC. That is their ideological goal. Now, if you look at United States and its policy, the US has deliberately kept its policy ambiguous with regard to Taiwan. US has officially accepted One China Principle and One China Policy. Okay, US is also one of the countries which has recognized the so-called One China Principle, One China Policy, which means US can't have ties with Taiwan. But the US has kept its position very ambiguous, along with the other European countries, Western powers, including Canada. They've deliberately poked China by using the Taiwan issue, and especially US. The US even has a dedicated law passed by the US Congress that defines US relations with Taiwan. Though it's not supposed to have full-fledged relations because it has accepted One China Principle and Policy. And in some ways, it recognizes Taiwan as Chinese territory, just like India and others do. But it has kept it ambiguous as well. the wordings of the American agreement with China is very ambiguous, which allows US to maintain that position, and it continues to work closely with Taiwan across multiple domains. The US backs democratic elections and the democratic government in Taiwan. It has become the key military supplier, providing advanced arms and defense supplies. It has basically used Taiwan as a proxy to set up Taiwan as a balance, a counterbalance against China. So this is made possible through American law. Please make a note of this. The Taiwan Relations Act of 1979. When US-China relations were normalized, when US recognized PRC in 1970s and re-established the relations, eventually US accepted one China, one principle and policy, stating that Taiwan is basically part of China. But the wordings of that agreement, the commitment that US made, was deliberately kept ambiguous so that someday US might exploit that issue. So it enacted a law, the Taiwan Relations Act, to define America's relations with Taiwan. Through this law, US maintains political, economic, cultural ties, including military defense relations with Taiwan. I hope all of you know Taiwan is a leading economy, especially in the semiconductors and electronics industry. Taiwan is a global leader. The Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Corporation is one of the world's largest semiconductor firms. Taiwan has that domination, almost global domination, and it is even part of a Western alliance called the Fab 4, also known as the Chip 4 Alliance. It includes the US, South Korea, Japan. The leading semiconductor fabricators are part of this Fab 4 alliance along with Taiwan. So US, Japan, South Korea have aligned with Taiwan with regard to fabrication of semiconductor chips. So here they are in competition with China as well. The US keeps sending advanced weaponry, and this is something that angers China. US and Western powers keep on deploying their military vessels and assets. They even send their top officials to visit the country, which is opposed by China. So this is a deliberate move by the West to instigate China. So it's a very dangerous game that Western powers have been playing for many years. Just like they instigated Russia through Ukraine, a very similar strategy has been followed here, where US, European powers, even Canada and others, all the Western allies have constantly meddled in Taiwan to instigate China, to counterbalance China. US not only supplies weapons, it conducts deliberate high-level visits. It also conducts military exercises and deployments, including naval deployments in the Taiwan Strait. Now, obviously, this is resisted by China. China retaliates as well, and China conducts deliberate incursions, military incursions, in order to threaten Taiwan with war. Every now and then, Chinese naval ships and fighter jets will cross over the boundary lines, and they appear to threaten Taiwan as a warning, as a warning message to stay away from Western powers. So this has been a tense equation that has persisted for many years for now. But with the arrival of the Trump administration, things are changing a bit. Donald Trump, being a transactional leader, appears to be going back on some commitments. Donald Trump has stated that Taiwan should basically pay more for America's security. So what does it mean? Trump expects Taiwan to purchase more weapons from the US. Trump has even alleged that Taiwan has exploited the US in order to dominate semiconductor fabrication. This is Trump's allegation against Taiwan as well. Though traditionally US has been backing Taiwan against China, now Trump has brought up these questions. He has asked Taiwan to pay up for the security that US is offering. He has asked Taiwan to purchase more weapons to benefit American companies, which can create more American jobs. And Trump has alleged that Taiwan dominated the semiconductor space by exploiting the American influence, essentially by accessing the key materials and supply chains with American help. Trump has alleged that Taiwan has dominated semiconductor industry. So this has created a new friction in US-Taiwan relationship. But don't think US is going to abandon Taiwan, because Trump's main enemy is always China. Trump has always made it clear that according to him, China is the greatest threat for US. Recently, the US has changed its approach. That's why this article has been published by The Hindu. US has published a fact sheet on Taiwan. In this fact sheet, historically, US would always state that it will not support the independence of Taiwan. Officially, US would never support the independence of Taiwan. It would make a statement, officially issue this fact sheet by stating that they don't support Taiwan's demand for independence. But this time, the US has changed it. The Trump administration has made a change. For the first time in the fact sheets released by the State Department, the US has made no mention regarding the support that they don't provide for Taiwan's independence. Officially, that's the position of the US, meaning Trump administration is escalating with China. The fact sheet does not assert that US doesn't support the independence of Taiwan. In fact, it has gone one step ahead, and the US has promised support to Taiwan if it buys more weapons, if it pays for its security being given by the US, if it collaborates with US in semiconductor technology. Then Trump administration has promised that they will basically not stop Taiwan from demanding independence. They'll even enable Taiwan to get membership into international organizations, including United Nations. Now, this is a very provocative and aggressive step, and China obviously has rejected it. It has retaliated against these developments. So Trump might be looking for a trade-off. As a transactional leader, he's expecting Taiwan to buy more weapons, pay for American security through investments, basically. He is pushing Taiwan and its companies, Taiwanese semiconductor companies, to invest in the American market, to step up semiconductor production in US. In return, US is saying that we will support your call for independence, that we won't stop you from asserting your right for independence, and will help you join international organizations. That is the change that you see in America's Taiwan policy, which could actually aggravate the tensions between China and Taiwan. China can easily choose to retaliate and even target Taiwan for this. And there's no guarantee that US will come to the aid and support of Taiwan. Next, we have an article on page 4 that refers to a very disturbing development. In Chhattisgarh, following elections to local panchayats, where seats were reserved for women candidates, where women candidates had stood for elections in the reserved seats and won, instead of they taking the oath, their husbands were seen to be publicly taking the oath, though they did not even contest the panchayat election. Now, this disturbing issue, I had discussed the same topic just, I think, last week. Last week, we spoke about an expert committee of the Ministry of Panchayati Raj, which has submitted recommendations on how to tackle this very exact same problem. The problem of proxy sarpanch, the problem of pradhan pati. Basically, in seats reserved for women, the men of the household, they just put up women from their houses as proxies, either the brother or the husband or the father, and they will take all the decisions eventually. They assume that role and perform those functions as well, though they are not elected. See, if you look at the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act, the whole purpose was to decentralize governance. It provided for 1/3 reservation for women candidates to increase women representation. Most states have gone beyond this by providing 50% reservation for women in panchayats. Today, we have around 3.2 million panchayat leaders who are elected, out of them, 46% of them are women. Out of the 3.2 million panchayat leaders who get elected, close to 46-47% of them are women candidates, which is a true symbol of women empowerment, because women will get into leadership positions, into policy making, decision making positions. But the unfortunate ground reality is that in many households, in many panchayat constituencies, what is happening is that the male leaders who can't contest in the reserved seats, they simply put up women candidates from their families, their sisters, wives or daughters, and the men of the household, they control the power and the authority. Now, these men in Chhattisgarh, they went one step beyond. After the elections, women candidates who had won, they should have taken the oath at least. But publicly, imagine, publicly in the panchayat office, the so-called proxy sarpanches or the pradhan patis, without hesitation, have taken the oath themselves. Though it's their wives or the women of their families who have won those seats, they have no legitimacy, no right to even be present in that office. But they have taken the oath, which clearly points towards the misuse of the policy of women reservation. That's why the expert committee has given some important recommendations, which I discussed last week. I hope you remember this expert committee. Can you find out who was the chairperson of this expert committee? I told this in last week's session. Can you mention this in the comments? Who headed this expert committee headed by Ministry of Panchayati Raj? This expert committee has recommended exemplary penalties, exemplary penal provisions on such proxy sarpanches, on such pradhan patis, to deter this practice, to deter the men and to push them away and to ensure they stay away from controlling the women of the household. Because this is an opportunity for women in rural areas to come out, take up leadership roles and be part of the policy making and decision making at the grassroots level, at the village level, at the block level, and at the Zilla Panchayat level. So this expert committee has recommended to the government that maybe public oath has to be administered to the women candidates who have won so that their presence can be established. But look at these guys taking public oath without any hesitation, though they are not the ones who have won the election. It's women in their families who have won, and as proxies they have taken oath without any hesitation. So these men who have done this, which is clearly unconstitutional, they deserve the strictest of punishment. That's what the expert committee has recommended. It has recommended exemplary penal provisions to create a deterrence and also bring in some reforms to make the women leaders more empowered. For example, in Kerala, there's a very interesting reform. What Kerala has done, for various subject committees, women reservation has been created. So only women leaders can be part of those panels and those committees where decisions are taken at the Gram Sabha level and Panchayat level. So that is true representation, inclusive representation and decentralization. Something like that can be done. And a deterrence has to be created where those men who act as, who basically put up their women as proxies, right? This practice has to end. This is nothing but a continuation of the patriarchal nature of our society. This has to be broken by imposing exemplary penalties on such men leaders, right, who are misusing the system. Next, on page 15, the IMF is warning India. The IMF has published an important report, the India Financial System Stability Assessment. In this report, the IMF is warning that non-banking finance companies have a significantly higher exposure towards the power sector and infrastructure sector in India. Now, this is quite alarming because if you look at the power industry, for example, 63% of the loans taken by the power sector has been given by 3 NBFCs. See, non-banking finance companies, they are meant to enable easy availability of credit to provide for loans, especially for specific sectors. They don't perform regular banking functions. They don't take saving deposits, for example, but they deliver financing facilities like providing credit, providing loans. These NBFCs play a big role in promoting financial inclusion, in pushing the availability of credit across the country in specific key sectors. Like you have a NBFC specializing in infrastructure lending, NBFC specializing in power sector or in textiles, for example, or in agriculture sector. But these NBFCs today have significantly higher exposure, disproportionate exposure towards the power sector and infrastructure sector. And this is a cause for alarm according to this IMF report. Because see, there is every possibility of a stagflation or a recessionary situation in India and in the global economy. The global economy currently is not looking very good. The recessionary trends which are developing could result in a stagflation in India, where inflation levels could increase and growth will stagnate, unemployment levels will remain higher, leading to a classic stagflation. This will significantly reduce demand. Now, in such a scenario, obviously power consumption will go down, infrastructure viability will also go down. So many of the projects could turn into non-performing assets. It could become a bad loan where NBFCs may not be able to recover the massive loans they have given out. This could threaten the health of NBFCs, leading to their collapse. This could have a bigger impact because where do you think NBFCs got that money which they have lent to power industry and infrastructure sector? They have borrowed from public sector banks. Public sector banks have the actual exposure. NBFCs have borrowed heavily from public sector banks, given this loan to power sector and infrastructure sector, amounting to almost 63% in the power industry. If the economy were to see a recessionary trend, hit a stagflation scenario, power consumption were to go down, many of these loans might turn bad, right? The power companies may not be able to pay the NBFCs. And if the financial stability of NBFCs is threatened, it will eventually affect the public sector banks because they are the ones who have loaned this money to NBFCs in the first place. The concern flagged by IMF is that public sector banks in India, they are struggling to maintain the capital adequacy ratio of 9%. They are not able to maintain the Basel standards as prescribed. They are not able to maintain adequate capital. Right? They're supposed to maintain 9% capital adequacy ratio to deal with any liquidity crisis, to deal with such a rise in non-performing assets, so that the stability of the banking system is not threatened. But today, there is a possibility where the banking system might see a failure, collapse, if we see a stagflationary or a recessionary situation. That's the warning given by IMF regarding the overexposure of NBFCs in India towards few sectors like power sector and infrastructure sector. Next, another related topic related to US, Trump's policies, related to economy. As promised, the Trump administration has started levying tariffs against Canada, Mexico, and China. This had been a promise that Trump had made in his presidential campaign. He had announced a tariff of 25% against Canada, 25% against Mexico, 10% against China. Because see, US largely runs a trade deficit against most of the countries. As US largely pushed manufacturing away from its own country a few decades ago in order to reduce the cost, right? Manufacturing shifted to other countries. US started importing essentials from others. Canada, Mexico supply most of the essentials consumed by the American market. China, as it emerged as a manufacturing powerhouse in 80s and 90s, became the lead supplier of all essential supplies and key components to the American market. This basically resulted in US running huge trade deficits with all the trading partners, be it the European allies, even with India, the US runs a trade deficit. So Trump has led a campaign against such trade deficits. He has promised to bridge the trade deficit and bring back manufacturing to US, which will help in creating jobs for Americans, which will help in fulfilling his presidential campaign goal of making America great again, of putting America first again. So he had threatened tariffs against many countries, including close allies. Not just China, but even close allies like Canada, Europe were being threatened by Donald Trump. So as he had announced, the tariffs against some of these countries have now come into effect. 25% against Canada and Mexico, and against China, it has been increased to 20%. US had announced 10% initially, but now it's been doubled to 20% tariff against select Chinese products. Now, obviously, this will have a significant impact on Canada and Mexico. Because see, if you look at Canada's exports, almost 70%, more than 70% of Canada's exports are headed towards US. Same with Mexico. Out of the entire exports from Mexico, more than 70% of it is consumed in the US. These tariffs, which will make Canadian Mexican products uncompetitive and expensive in the American market, will hit Canadian Mexican exports, affecting their industries, affecting their economy. Same with China, right? So now what we will see is a trade war. In fact, it has already started. The moment American tariffs kicked into effect the other day, Canada has already announced retaliatory tariffs with 25% counter tariffs on American exports to Canada. China also has retaliated, especially in the agriculture sector, with 15% tariffs against American agricultural exports to China. So this tit for tat trade war, because in diplomacy, in trade, it's always reciprocal. You get what you give. If America is threatening everyone, trying to bully everyone with tariffs, other trade partners will retaliate as well with counter tariffs, which will basically push the world and the global economy into a spiraling crisis. That's one of the prime reasons why global markets have crashed, why investors are holding back, and you're witnessing possible recessionary trends in the global economy. So we have seen the restart of a trade war. We saw this in the Trump administration previously, during the first Trump administration. So the trade war which Trump had promised has started officially. Canada has already retaliated with counter tariffs. China has also retaliated. Mexico is all set to announce counter tariffs as well. So this is something we should continue to follow. It's a developing story. India is trying to escape the tariffs that Trump has threatened by negotiating a trade agreement. During recent visit of Prime Minister Modi to US, we have agreed to finalize a trade agreement by the mid of this year, which could allow India to escape the tariff war. So let's see how things will develop, how it could affect the global economy. Now let's move towards the prelim section and quickly wrap up today's session. Look at this article on page number 2. The new government in Delhi, the BJP government, which has recently come to power after a historic electoral victory, has promised to clear the Balswa landfill by next year, by March 2026. Now, this was a promise that the previous AAP government had made, but never managed to fulfill that promise. I'm sure many of you would have heard about this notorious landfill on the outskirts of Delhi. In fact, if you go outside of Delhi, in Ghaziabad, in Noida, and also towards Gurgaon, there are these major landfills where all the urban waste is being dumped. Huge mountains have been built, piles of garbage has been dumped, creating these mega urban landfills, which is a serious environmental hazard. So what are these landfills? Landfills are basically dumping grounds for urban waste. Garbage which is generated in a city is dumped in these landfills. Is that clear? The urban municipal authorities, when they are not able to scientifically process all the waste, because a city can generate massive volumes of waste, one practice is to dump them in a landfill. Usually in a landfill, these pits are dug, huge pits are dug up. The bottom layer is sealed with clay. It is sealed with clay. Also, an entire plastic layer is put up, and a drain system is also created, because the urban garbage which is dumped in these landfills and compacted and pressed, it will lead to leaching of many toxic pollutants and hazardous substances. Because this waste material will contain all types of waste, from electronic waste to plastic waste and many other hazardous substances which can even leach heavy metals. So that's why the general practice is that in such a landfill, see, in a landfill, the waste is not simply thrown. It is compacted and pressed. If you've ever seen these videos or images, you might see a huge machinery, earth-moving equipment, which is working at a landfill, constantly moving the waste and compacting it, pressing it, and keeping it as a compacted waste material. Because eventually they'll have to create a huge pile. They have to make enough space for the future years as well. So they compact and press the waste material, creating this mountain-like structure eventually. So this waste will obviously decompose partially. The material will start breaking down. It's exposed to all the elements, to the heat and the wind and the water. So all the hazardous toxic substances present will start leaching. These landfills are one of the biggest environmental hazards. It's one of the largest contributors for methane emissions, which is a greenhouse gas. Sometimes part of the landfill can catch fire, resulting in carbon emissions and also toxic air pollutants. Oxides of nitrogen, sulfur will get released if part of the landfill catches fire. Is that clear? It's responsible for methane emissions, carbon emissions and air pollutants which are released. Plus heavy metals might start leaching along with other toxic chemicals. Now I think you can tell me what will happen because of this. This can pollute the soil and it can pollute the groundwater and also the water sources present nearby. If any lakes, water bodies, rivers are present, it can easily get contaminated. And as a result, those people living around these landfills are exposed to the environmental risk. In many parts of the world, wherever such landfills are present, the nearby habitations report many deadly diseases, including cancers, because they are exposed to such toxic contaminants. And that is the problem that is in front of the people of Delhi, especially those who reside near these deadly landfills. So now the new government in Delhi has promised to clear the landfill by next year. So let's see if they deliver on this commitment. So basically, I wanted you to understand what's the landfill, what are the impacts, the environmental hazards associated with landfills. Next, a small update from Kerala. The Kerala cabinet, the government essentially has adopted a resolution. The Kerala State Assembly, with a push from the cabinet and the government, has adopted this resolution against offshore mining, because the central government is pushing for mining the assets, mineral assets present offshore. See, we have a law that regulates offshore activities, especially mining activities, which was passed by the parliament in 2002. It's known as Offshore Areas Minerals Development and Regulation Act. So under this law, the union government has the authority to regulate any kind of offshore mining. So when we say offshore mining, we are referring to mining off the coast, essentially deep sea mining, because in the seas and the oceans, there could be precious minerals resources present. So we have a legal regulatory framework which vests the authority with the center to promote offshore mining. Now, this law of 2002 was recently amended in 2023. In 2023, the parliament amended the law which now allows the union government to auction offshore mining blocks, deep sea mining blocks to private companies to promote and encourage offshore mining in the country. So we can harvest the minerals and the wealth and resources present on the seafloor, on the seabed. So the union government is pushing ahead to exploit the mineral resources that is found in our exclusive economic zone, and it's looking to promote offshore mining. And as per this amendment, it's looking to auction mining blocks in the deep seas for private companies to exploit. But Kerala government is taking a stand against it, because Kerala government is concerned, and the Kerala Assembly has adopted this resolution. They are concerned about the environmental impact, because obviously deep sea mining could harm the sensitive coastal marine ecosystems. It could contribute to pollution, it could threaten the fishermen, affect the availability of fish, and thus threaten their livelihood. So on these grounds, Kerala has opposed offshore mining on environmental grounds and livelihood grounds, and it has adopted this resolution. Next, another update from Kerala. A second article related to Kerala. This time, it's related to a tunnel project which has been proposed in Wayanad. I hope you know where Wayanad is located. It's part of the Western Ghats in Kerala, part of the Nilgiri Biosphere Reserve. So Wayanad is a wildlife sanctuary, a protected area that lies next to Bandipur and Nagarhole National Parks in Karnataka and the Mudumalai National Park and Tiger Reserve in Tamil Nadu. So it's a key habitat for tigers, for elephants, and many threatened species found in the Western Ghats. And also don't forget, Wayanad, as part of the Western Ghats, has a hilly mountainous terrain, and it's very, very prone and vulnerable to landslides. I hope all of you remember the recent tragedy that occurred in Wayanad. Just few months ago, last year, there was a deadly landslide in Wayanad. Where did the landslide occur? It occurred at Churalmala, Mundakai, Puttumala region. So this region is already prone to landslides. The ecology is very vulnerable. The terrain is very fragile. In such a region, the government is pushing ahead with a tunnel project. A tunnel is coming up. A twin tube tunnel is coming up, linking Anakam with Taladi and Mepadi. So the tunnel which will be constructed here in Wayanad district will basically reduce the travel time between Wayanad and Kozhikode. It will significantly reduce the travel time and duration. Of course, it has a lot of economic benefits. It will improve connectivity. It can improve logistics. It can help the farmers, the local businesses. But at what cost? That is the question. So a state level expert appraisal committee has granted the clearance. Environmental clearance has been provided, but with sufficient warning. Because one, it's a key habitat. The habitat has to be protected. It should not be disturbed. And on the other ground, the landslide vulnerability has to be kept in mind. So the expert committee, which has granted the clearance, has mandated that the company which will execute the project will have to conduct micro-scale mapping of the slopes to check the stability of the slopes and their resilience to withstand possible landslides, especially during monsoon months when Wayanad receives very intense and heavy rainfall. The slopes of the Western Ghats here can become very vulnerable to slippage. That's what causes the deadly disaster. So micro-scale mapping has been recommended. It's a mandatory requirement for this project. The project executioner will have to hire the right experts and consulting firms to conduct a micro-scale mapping of the region to study each and every slope where the tunnel is being built and maintain constant surveillance and monitoring so that a future tragedy can be prevented. Is that clear? So this project has faced a lot of opposition as well. Next, on page 14, we have a very interesting article, some positive news for India in the healthcare sector. The government, which is implementing the national health policy, which focuses on maternal health and infant health, it has some very positive numbers to report with regard to infant mortality rate and maternal mortality rate and even under 5 mortality rate. See, this is always a key health indicator. The MMR, IMR rates and under 5 mortality rates are a clear indicator of the quality of your public healthcare system. So developing nations generally tend to have a very high MMR, IMR rates. India also had very high MMR, IMR rates prior to 1990s. But from 1990 till today, in the last 3 decades especially, until 2020 data is available, India has done phenomenally well through various programs, healthcare programs, welfare programs, focused on maternal health and infant health. Be it the Janani Suraksha Yojana, the Pradhan Mantri Matru Vandana Yojana. The government has given adequate priority through the national health policy to promote institutional delivery. to provide adequate health care for pregnant women, to encourage pregnant women to access good nutrition, to incentivize them, to cover their wage loss by compensating them with cash transfers. So all such support has been provided. The ASHA workers have played a pivotal role in assisting pregnant women and in helping them to take care of the infants. The whole focus has been on ensuring that the mother and the child have access to institutional health care. The delivery happens in a public healthcare institution with adequate health checkups and follow-ups, with vaccination, and access to nutrition and financial stability. All the government welfare programs have yielded results under the Millennium Development Goals and Sustainable Development Goals of the UN, which India has been pursuing over the last few decades. So data from 1990 to 2020 shows a significant improvement for India. We have reduced maternal mortality rate by 83%. This is something the country should be proud of. This is higher than the global decline. From 1990 to 2020, if you take the data for these 3 decades, India's reduction of MMR is 83%, which is higher than the global average in decline of MMR rates. So according to the government, MMR today stands at 100 deaths per 1 lakh live births. This number, I still remember, used to be about 200 at one point. With a lot of struggle, we brought it to 190, 180, which was still very high. Now, MMR has come down to just 100 deaths per 1 lakh live births. We see a 83% decline in maternal mortality rate over the last 3 decades. Infant mortality rate has seen a 69% decline compared to the global average, which is around 55%. Global average is 55% decline in infant mortality rates, the number of infants who pass away during childbirth. But India has reduced these rates by 69%. Under 5 mortality rate, that is a child under the age of 5 years. What's the mortality rate amongst them? This has come down in India by 75%, which is also higher than the global average. So India has clearly outperformed the global average when it comes to maternal and infant health care. That is the takeaway from this article. It marks the success of our healthcare programs focused on pregnant women and infant children. Next, the Belgian leadership is on a visit to India. Belgian princess and the deputy prime minister, they are in India talking to Indian leaders, trying to improve India-Belgium relations. And the focus is stepping up defense ties between India and Belgium. So India-Belgium have signed a contract. A Belgian defense manufacturer will be tying up with an Indian defense company in Pune to mass produce battle tank turrets for the Zorawar light battle tanks, which has been indigenously developed by DRDO and Larsen and Toubro. DRDO and L&T have indigenously developed a light battle tank. Zorawar is the name of this battle tank. It is very crucial for us, especially in places like Ladakh, where we face off against China. Given its light weight, it can be easily airlifted and deployed at a short moment's notice. So India has given a lot of priority for light battle tanks. Even against the Pakistani front, light battle tanks can be pivotal in the future of wars. So for India, it's a priority. So as we are building this indigenous light battle tank called Zorawar, we are in need of advanced turrets or tank turrets. What's a turret? Can you see this structure here? This armament which can basically rotate. That is called a tank turret. This part of the battle tank, let's say this is a battle tank, the dome-like structure which is present, which provides a shield as well for the troops and consists of the armament. This portion of the tank is called a turret. Now, this is a key technology which is not easy to design and develop and mass produce. So Belgium has pioneered it. So India has signed a deal where a joint venture company is being set up, 60% owned by Belgium, 40% in India. This Belgian company will transfer the technology. It will give all the expertise and it will be produced in India in line with Make in India initiative. to promote indigenous production of defense components. So that is the development here with regard to India-Belgium relations, and the Zorawar battle tank can be important. The last topic for today before we wrap up today's class, this small article refers to the crash of a fighter jet belonging to Philippines Air Force in a conflict-hit region known as the Mindanao region. The Mindanao province of Philippines is a victim of conflict which has been going on for many, many years. So I feel it's an important place which is in the news. You should know where it is located, why there is a conflict here in this part of Philippines. See, the Mindanao region is located over here. Philippines is an island nation which is scattered across the Pacific Ocean. This would be South China Sea here. This would be the Pacific. So you can see the map of Philippines, which is clearly a Christian majority country. But there is a pocket in Philippines which is Muslim majority over here, which is nothing but the Mindanao region. The Mindanao region is a Muslim majority region. So Muslims are in minority here, but the Mindanao region is a Muslim majority region. So from many, many decades, the native Muslims in Mindanao have issues with Philippines government. There are few communist groups operating here leading a left-wing extremist insurgency, such as the Moro National Liberation Front. These indigenous Muslims of the Mindanao region, they are also known as the Moro people. Please remember this. UPSC might ask you, where are the Moro people found? In which region, in which part of the world? The Moro community, an ethnic Muslim community, is found in the Mindanao region of Philippines. So there are few communists leading a left-wing extremist war. There are few right-wing extremists who have adopted radical religious fundamentalism and taken up jihadist ideology and carrying out major terror attacks in the region through groups such as the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. Even Al-Qaeda and Islamic State have made a presence in the Mindanao region of Philippines, and it's a conflict-hit region. There is an active insurgency, terrorism going on over here. The government of Philippines constantly battles the threats present in the Mindanao region. So that is something you should be aware of, especially for your prelims. I don't think others would shed light on this topic, so I hope you guys are clear on this. That's why I've shared the map as well. So please take down and make a note of this point. On this note, I bring my discussion to an end. I hope it's been an interesting session. So do let me know what you think in the comments. With this, let's close the class for today. We'll meet tomorrow. Thanks for watching.